Hi guys! Yes, I got an offer from Microsoft, and in this video I'll be sharing my experience in detail along with a few mistakes that I did and the things that I learned during the process. I'll also be sharing some tips so that it might be helpful for people who are about to interview, and hopefully you guys can learn from my experience. Because of the NDA, I can't share specific questions, but I'll talk about each round in detail and what was the difficulty level of the questions that were asked to me. So let's get started. One thing that I found different about Microsoft interview process, and not positively different, was that in no round I knew exactly what was going to be asked. Like for example, in Uber and Amazon rounds, I knew that whether it is LLD round or HLD rounds. So I was mentally prepared for those sort of questions. But in Microsoft, I was told that there will be 2 coding rounds and 2 design rounds. Now in coding, I did not know specifically whether this is DSA round or low level design round. And in design also, I did not know whether this is high level design or low level design. Why I'm mentioning this is because I am sort of a person who needs to be mentally prepared for a kind of interview. Like before DSA rounds, I would go through a few syntaxes, or before HLD, I would go through my checklist, or before LLD, I would think, okay, these are the design patterns that I should think of. So I'm in a particular mind frame during a particular interview. But in Microsoft, that was not the case. Now, when I was interviewing for Microsoft, I had already given a lot of interviews for Uber, Amazon. This was the last company for which I interviewed. So I had already given a lot of interviews. So I was in the flow and I was okay with it. But say if I was interviewing only for Microsoft, or say this was the first company that I would have interviewed for, this would have been a bit tricky for me, I think so. That's why I wanted to mention this, because while interviewing, a lot of unpredictable scenarios can happen. Sometimes in some companies it might happen that you were expecting some different type of question and you are asked some different type of question. But you have to be mentally ready to handle that sort of pressure, to handle all sorts of questions. So if you are about to interview, say after a while, don't go like I'm going to practice only DSA problems. If you are interviewing for a level where you will be asked HLD, LLD questions also in one of the rounds. So be mentally prepared that things could go wrong, or at least, make sure that you have that conversation with the recruiter and you know in advance that what sort of interview are you looking for. So when I interviewed for Uber and Amazon, like after talking to recruiter, I knew exactly that, okay, this is going to happen. But when I talked to Microsoft recruiter, I was already doubtful. I did not know, because when I asked whether this is going to be LLD round or HLD round, and the answer was that, okay, it is a combination of both. So at that time itself, I was like, how is that going to work? How can an interview be a combination of LLD, HLD? So I was already a bit concerned about this. So I was mentally ready for it. So I wanted to quickly mention that a lot of unexpected things can happen during interviewing, but it is a talent which comes, I think, with a lot of practice, say a lot of mock interviews, to be able to handle this sort of pressure and be ready for any sort of unexpected things that can happen. Coming to the first round, as I said, I was told that this is a coding round. It started with interviewer asking me about my work at Intuit. So I talked a bit about my projects and what was I doing about the tech stack that I was working on. Then the interviewer asked me to talk about the architecture of the product that I was working on. So now in Intuit, I worked on a desktop product, and architecture wise, I worked more closely and on a more interesting project in Tally Solutions, which was my first company. So whenever I am asked to explain architecture of my previous projects, I usually prefer to explain the architecture of the Tally Solutions product that I used to work on, because there I was working on microservices and it was very interesting. So that was a very interesting project. I got to learn a lot, and in terms of interview, it is a very nice project to explain in an interview. So whenever I am asked in interview, I usually explain that particular project. I am telling this because if you are interviewing and you have any experience, be prepared for any question that can be asked about your previous experience. It can be about tech stack, about the project that you worked on, about the architecture of the project that you worked on. So if you're a fresher, don't just bother about, finishing your stories or getting your work done. Make sure that you have end-to-end idea about what is happening in your project. And if you have certain amount of experience and you're going to interview in near future, be ready to explain at least one of the projects of your past, and especially the last project that you have worked on. So usually a lot of interviewers can go like, explain the last project that you worked on, or the last company, what work did you do over there? Why did you leave the company? These are the sort of questions that can come. I'm talking this with experience. I'm saying this in general and not just for Microsoft interview, because in all the companies that I interviewed for, this was asked at some point or the other. So yes, I explained the entire architecture of the project I was working on, and I drew the diagram and I talked about each components. There were a few cross questions and I was able to answer all of them. And after explaining the architecture of my project, I was asked a DSA problem. So note here that I was mentally prepared for a coding round. I was mentally prepared for a DSA or a LLD question, and I was asked to explain the high level architecture of my project, right? I could have come in tension and maybe I would not have handled the DSA question that well. So when you watch interview experience videos or you read blogs about it, note these things and be ready for it, learn from others' experiences. Coming to the DSA question, it was based on linked list. I had to find middle element and also reverse a part of the linked list. So I didn't have to write just the function. I had to write the entire code, take input, make sure everything is running. I had to take multiple cases and make sure, yeah, everything is running. So after the discussions, not so much time was spending, so I did have a bit amount of pressure because you're not used to linked list questions being asked usually. So you should have like good amount of practice to be able to handle all the cases very fast. Like without freaking out, you should be able to handle odd length linked list and even length linked list. After that, I was asked to implement a STL data structure by myself. Now I feel I could have done this question a lot better, but whatever I could think of at that time, I tried handling all the cases, but I think I could have done better. There was not enough time left for the detailed discussion, but I think interviewer was okay with it because I did eventually crack the entire process right. Before we get to the next round, let me tell you about the sponsor of the video. Coding Ninjas is one of the largest coding education companies and I've taught around 50,000 students. It offers courses from basic to advanced level in programming in C++, Java, machine learning, web dev, Android development, and data science. They have exceptional content curated by experts from IIT, Stanford, Amazon, and Facebook. They have 1:1 doubt resolving support, and all the doubts usually get solved within 1 to 2 hours. They have 1,000+ questions asked in companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and there are more to practice. They have 4.9 star rating on Google and Facebook reviews. Their courses are very well structured for college students, and if students put right hard work and efforts, these courses will be enough to crack any tech job interview. Use the link in the description to avail 20% discount on all Coding Ninjas courses. Coming to my second interview, now this was early in the morning and that same day I received offers from 2 companies. So I already had a lot on my mind. I was thinking a lot and I was a bit sleepy. So I was not at all in the right mind frame to give the interview. So another point, no matter what you have going on in your life, before the interview, I usually do it in all the interviews, but in that particular interview, I did not do. Like 15 minutes before the interview, I just sit on my table and do nothing. Don't think about anything. Just think about, being able to give your best. No matter how good you are or how much practice you have, I think the mindset really, really matters. And I really understood that in this particular interview. So I was given a DSA question. What happened in Microsoft interviews was that I was just given a meeting link in the invite. And during the meeting, the interviewer gave me a Codility link in the chat and I had to open that and write code in that. Now I'm not used to Codility and I don't know why, but a lot of syntaxes were not working, at least during this interview for me. So the DSA question that I was asked, I knew that it could be solved by priority queue very easily. I told the approach almost instantaneously, but when I started writing the code, the hash include priority queue itself was not working. Now I did not know why. I just wanted the elements to be sorted as I'm inserting them. So I tried writing the code using set, but again erase was not working for set. Now I was like, why is this not working? And I couldn't think of an alternate approach. Otherwise I would have to write like a lot of code to implement like pop out of a priority queue or erase out of a set. Interviewer was very helpful and she went like, okay, let me check out the syntax for you. And she checked. I was actually writing the correct syntax, but for some reason it was not working. So I'm just saying that things can go wrong. Even though I knew the syntax was right, I don't know what was going wrong at that time. I still don't know, but it was not working. So the code that I implemented was not as optimized as the solution that I had explained. So, but I wanted the code to run. I wanted the cases to be handled because in the end, interviewer wants to see, did the code run? Did you get the output or not? That is how they are going to judge whether you were able to implement the code or not, right? So I explained properly that this is the most optimized solution that I can think of. But because my syntaxes are not working, let me write the code in this way, although this is not that optimized, but I wrote the code and I told the time complexity of that also. So in the end, all the cases were handled, and in the remaining time after DSA, I was asked a bit about design concepts, but that was in very less time, so that's fine. Honestly, after this round, I was like, I have bombed my Microsoft interview very bad. Like, I was making syntax mistakes, I was struggling with writing one erase, and I was very, very disappointed with myself. But I was like, it's okay, I have a lot going on, I already have 2 offers, it's fine. But I did get positive feedback and I went ahead to the design round. So this is me telling you that sometimes we think that we have done really, really bad in interview, but maybe on the basis of your previous interview rounds, or maybe on the basis of your thought process, or maybe because I'd already told the HR that I have these 2 offers and I wanted to, speed up the process. Maybe that is why they gave me another chance. I don't know what was the reason. But sometimes we think that we are not going to get through to the next round, and we do. So don't be that disheartened if things don't go the way you had expected to in the interview. Again and again, saying a lot of unexpected things can happen. Coming to the third round, I was told that this is a design round. So I was confused whether the question that will be asked will be LLD or HLD. So I was in that mindset. But the question that I was asked was a DSA question, the first question that I was asked. Now, it was a question based on recursion, and it had a lot of cases to be handled. So I had to handle brackets, parentheses, curly braces, all of that. So there are a lot of ways to implement the solution. It was fairly simple recursive solution, but it is all about how beautifully you can write the code. So honestly, I wrote a bit lengthy code. I was writing if cases and all of that, and I could have improved it much better. So initially, like 1 or 2 cases were working and the other cases were not working. And my interviewer was continuously pushing me to write code in a particular way. Although at that time I felt, implementing the code in that way would have meant like I would have to erase the code that I have written and start from scratch again. So at that time I did not listen to him and I continued in the way that I was writing. And then a few cases worked, a few didn't work. He was like, okay, we'll get back to this. I also want to ask you design questions. So I was like, okay, fine. So he asked me a very particular part of high level design. He basically gave me a use case and he told me, how are you going to store this data? What all things are you going to store? So I replied that I'm going to store it in SQL table. He asked what all data, how are you going to store it, why SQL table, and things like that. So it was not like a proper HLD question where I have to ask a lot about requirements and all. It was very, very specific question and a lot of cross questions related to that. Now, after that, we were still left with time. He had thought that we would take more time for that. So he was like, okay, let's finish. While we were discussing this design part, he thought that it will take some enough time. So he asked me whether I am okay with extending my interview. So here there is another thing that I want to tell you that happened during Microsoft process. So one of the rounds for a particular company had to be scheduled for say example 4 to 5. Now, this round was supposed to be 3 to 4. I'm giving example. Now, in that company, I told, I have some meeting and I'm going to be doing that from 3 to 4. So I cannot give the interview exactly at 4. I need like 15 or 20 minutes buffer. And the recruiter said that this is the only slot available. You have to accommodate and you have to be available. See, when you are continuously giving so many interviews, you have to handle such situations. So what happened? I told the recruiter that, see, I need 15 minutes break to freshen up, to go to washroom, to drink some water, and to be in the correct mindset. As I told you earlier, that before every interview, I sit and I don't think about anything. I just think about giving my best in the interview. So I always take like 15-20 minutes break between 2 interviews. This is how I work personally. Now, some people can give continuous interviews. It depends from person to person. But I just wanted to share this experience because it can happen with others also. Sometimes a particular company will schedule like 2 interviews back to back. Now, I always tell this that keep 15 minutes break or half an hour break between 2 interviews. Now, this has been asked in other rounds of other companies also, and especially it happens a lot in system design rounds that interviewer will ask you, are you okay extending the interview by 15-20 minutes? It can happen in DSA rounds also. Say some technical error happened, one of you could not connect, or maybe a particular link was not opening, so some time waste happened. So always keep a buffer after the interview that you have some time to extend it. Like in this case, say I told no to the interviewer that I have something right after this, probably I would not have gone through the round because I had a lot of time remaining and I finished the system design discussion very fast. And I told that anyway we were about to extend the interview by 15 minutes. So let me get back to the first question, the DSA question, and let me handle all the cases. So the interviewer was very impressed by this. He said it again and again, and he said, like, while we were closing the interview also, that I really liked your attitude, that you quickly finished the discussion of system design and you knew that we were extending it by 15 minutes. So you did not give up. You tried to handle all the cases of that question. And to make it even better, very patiently, I actually raised my code and I wrote the code in the way my interviewer was pushing me to. It sort of was like, okay, you were suggesting me to do this, let me do this, because I knew I have already handled 2 or 3 cases. Now I'm anyway optimizing my code. I'm rewriting it in a much better way. So let me do it the way my interviewer was suggesting me to do. So in this case, I am telling you that you also need a lot of patience to handle such situations. If your interviewer is pushing you to do a particular thing, like talk about something, not talk about something, if your interviewer is pushing you to write code in a certain way, even if it takes more patience, even if it takes more time, do it. Because that is what your interviewer is looking forward to. Maybe your interviewer will be happier with it. Or if you don't want to do it, if you think it will definitely not be good, explain it to the interviewer that why you are doing it and wait for the response if the interviewer seems okay with it or not okay with it. These are the small things that I have learned with practice, things that you can learn with mock interviews or, giving a lot of interviews essentially. So just wanted to share these little things with you. So to sum it up, after the DSA during the system design round, I was asked whether we can extend the interview by 15 minutes. We did that, but I finished the system design part well within time. And those 15 extra minutes I used for the DSA question itself. And in the end, interviewer was happy with it. After the 3rd round, recruiters scheduled the 4th round, but told me that I'll have to see your feedback and then I'll tell you whether this is a design round or whether this is a managerial round. So actually my interview was scheduled in the morning. I came to know one night before, late night, that whether this is a design round or a managerial round. And I was told that this is a managerial round. And I did not know whether this is going to be like a technical managerial round or is it going to be like more of a behavioral managerial round. And it ended being a mix of both. So initially, interviewer started with asking me a few cases like, tell me about a time when this happened, tell me about a time when that happened. And after that, interviewer shared his screen and he showed me an architecture. So basically, he was working on Azure. So he told me that this is one of the possible solutions. I'm not sure if it was a previous architecture or something. I'm not sure. So he showed me a diagram and he asked me what are the problems with this diagram? How can we improve the architecture? So there were a few things like, for example, multiple microservices were connected to a particular DB. So I told that that is not better. Also in a particular area, I suggested that, pub sub model can be used. That was a high level design concept, right? So this is another thing that I would like to just mention, that in HLD, sometimes it can happen that we know the concepts, but it might not hit to us. That is why it helps to have a cheat sheet. Like I have a cheat sheet that I'm going to share in the upcoming videos, that these are the topics that can be talked about, or these are the possible solutions to the problems that I'm coming across in a system. So sometimes the concept properly, but it should hit you also that this should be applied over here, and it comes with practice also. So I suggested that we should use a pub sub model, and I talked about how what sort of DB can be used. I also divided one part into 2 microservices to make sure that there is single responsibility, and there were discussions like that basically. So it was a very different kind of HLD discussion that I have never had before, and it was very interesting, I would say. After that, manager got back to asking questions about me, about my behavior. Like, for example, he asked me about one of my significant failures during my professional journey. So I talked about my first company where I was not given a particular award and all that. So he could actually connect with me, and I talked about the lessons that I learned from that. How did I improve? And I could understand that I have built a very good connect with the manager. So, always be ready with your strengths, weaknesses, especially when you're going for managerial round. Tell me about a time when you handle this particular sort of situation. Like, keep these sort of things ready to be talked about. After that, I talked about his experience in Microsoft, and he talked a lot in detail. He explained me very well, and we had a very good connect. Like, after that discussion, I would be very interested to work with him because he did explain about his work. He had good experience. I could connect very well, and I could understand that he is looking for, like, good team members and not just people who are good at software engineering. So it was very interesting. So after the 4 rounds, I was told that, yeah, I have cleared the entire process. And in the next video, I promise I am going to talk about interview experience about the company that I am joining. Yeah, I am not joining Microsoft. And I promise next is the last video. I am joining that company for sure. So I had 4 offers, technically 4.5. I did not finish the process of one of the companies. I will talk about all the 5 companies in detail in the video after that. I will talk about why I applied, how I applied, everything in detail. Next video is going to be about the company that I am joining. So please stay tuned. I hope my experience taught you something. Please do let me know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It would mean so much to me. Thank you.